So good afternoon, everyone, and very welcome back for those who join us for the second time today. And we have come up with a new series called Meet iToBoS after the summer, because the feedback we got from the patient community was that they wanted to know more about the European project, MPNE, as Melanoma Patient Network Europe is involved in, and iToBoS is, of course, our long-standing project. iToBoS is standing for an intelligent whole body scanner for the early detection of melanoma, and is a fantastic project because it is quite broad and diverse and involves participants from very different fields. So we have engineers, we have people who work on lenses and image recognition, people who work on artificial AI, we have people on ethics, we have people who work on data. So it is a very interesting group. So what we are now having is a little bit of time to talk to one of these consortium members, and today I'm super happy that Gilly, whom we all know here, has agreed to share a little bit about the work that she has been doing in iToBoS. Gilly, maybe you want to give us a little bit of your background, so how you ended up doing what you're doing now, what you then concretely are doing for iToBoS, and then we go into your talk, and then we hopefully have some time for questions and discussion. Looking forward to it. Over to you.
Thanks, Bettina, and thanks everyone for being here. I basically trained as a geologist, so not really helpful for healthcare, and soils and land evaluation. And then I worked for an NGO whose aims were kind of mitigating the impact of climate degradation in various African countries. And then I went on to working on environmental impact evaluations with local authorities and companies to get to the European environmental impact standards, which of course involved impact assessments. And then we did training for cooperatives, and eventually I did building a renovation of a huge house, and then running a farm and feeding my children and bringing my kids up, and really only got into cancer because, like we all do, we get into cancer because suddenly you or someone in your family is diagnosed with cancer, and you suddenly have to change direction and your life kind of completely changes. I wanted to really work a little bit around this idea of measuring what we do, because we do some amazing stuff, and I really think it's important to measure what we do and be able to tell everybody else what we do. So shall I go straight into the talk then? So this is just a little preamble that I want to put here. Just some quotes that have kind of really resonated with me in our life before cancer and since cancer. We all do the best we can until we know better, and then we start realizing that we should be recording things, measuring things, showing that we're actually having an impact. So I like that Maya Angelou quote. The other quote that I have here is the one that when I first went into working in northern Ghana, I had a village teacher who I got to know very well. And he said to me, "Our people have seen for years how outsiders come. They steal our secrets for their own knowledge. They give us only what they think we need in the form that we then cannot access or sustain." Now, for me, that is super important, because that's something I think all patient advocates have felt over time. What we're giving is not necessarily what we want to be given back, and we really need to work on this. And this, when I heard this, it rather shocked me, because I arrogantly kind of assumed I was a good person, helping people worse off than myself, had a head full of theoretical education, my heart was in the right place, and I had lots of useful assumptions. But he was right, of course, and the only way to improve the results was a methodology and a genuine wish to assess the impact for all involved, and then pivot when you need to. We wrote reports to our funders following these impact assessment methodologies. And yes, you can always make it look good. You can choose criteria that were fulfillable, if not entirely relevant to the changes that were needed. But the playing field was being leveled, and basically the community was having more say, which meant that sometimes we didn't get the purest environmental improvements that we'd assumed would solve their real situations. But we then were acting on real life priorities, which had to come first. And then the last quote I've got there is really quite a nice succinct comment that Bettina made about how we can influence research and the quality of research, which is really important. Grassroots wisdom. So for a good project, I added the good, it must be said, people have to be engaged and they have to see a tangible immediate benefit from their participation. But for it to continue, they have to see that their work is having an impact. So I want to really use the experience that I had working in these development projects to illustrate some of the values and techniques, which I really think are useful in measuring patient engagement in the cancer field. So in the Sahel, we were there to help build resilience into increasingly impoverished communities that were facing climate change and rapid degradation. The faster people implemented better resource management and adapted, the more climate change affected them. So we did tree planting, we had projects in water resource management, we had seed and credit schemes, we had appropriate technology building, we had capacity building. And we cannot, in Western countries, even compare our problems with what they have to endure in the Sahel. But there are useful learnings when we look at our strained health services, and which really now need the agency of patients and citizens. They cannot do without it. I had no choice but to immerse myself in cancer patient advocacy when my husband got cancer, but these experiences still resonate with me now. And I was always surprised that nobody seemed to be measuring the impact of what we did in patient advocacy. There were many examples of large social program impact assessments, like the Irish poverty assessment and the employment initiatives in Slovakia, how to assess whether this is working. But we were starting to sort of see papers coming out that showed that patient engagement was important and often beneficial to a project and health systems. And patients were happy that they were now being consulted and grateful for that, but there wasn't any detailed impact assessment of patient engagement for the patient community itself. And even within our patient organizations, we actually found it difficult to measure the impact of what we did. There were many who had great intentions, but the good that they were doing was supposed to speak for itself, rather than being effectively measured, assessed, adapted, and hopefully scaled. We ourselves would say, this is what we need. And in the case of melanoma, it seemed simple. We lost most of our advanced patients, and so access to treatments and strategies and ongoing research that kept them alive was our focus. But we never got around to saying, did we do what was needed? Because there was always the next problem. We had realized that to really make a change, we had to involve everyone implicated in that change, and that they all had mostly valid vested interests. And just another point just to think about is that, it's quite important, is that people don't dare to tell patients and patient advocates that what they bring is not useful, not helpful, or not educated enough. And we found this quite a lot. And I think it's really unfair for other stakeholders to have to be in this position. So, we do push honesty wherever we can. I want to have a look a little bit at some basics, really. So what is an impact assessment? Impact, the effect of any service, event, initiative, project on an individual group. So that speaks for itself. Outputs are things that are produced or already exist. Outcomes are the results of outputs that are existing or used. And impact is the broader, sort of longer term effects of these results. Change is the thing that we all want to create. And to measure change, you need a baseline. And then you check along the process with the same parameters. So in the context of assessing the impact of patient engagement in research, you can have the low-hanging fruit and then the much harder system change, which is basically what we all want in the end. But in general, it involves putting in place knowledge and skills, confidence and trust, equity and inclusivity, priorities and decisions, effectiveness and efficiency, patient-centeredness, of course, from what we understand as patient-centeredness, not necessarily what other stakeholders say, culture change, and last but certainly not least, patient outcomes and experiences. So in melanoma, I always like to cite the example that we found in France, where we thought it would be a good low-hanging fruit. We thought that educating the at-risk population would help prevent the unhealthy lifestyles that led to most melanomas. And we found that those that abused the sun and sunbeds the most actually had the best knowledge of the risk and early diagnosis than the wider population. So educating the high risk in this case would have really not had an impact that we assumed from the assumptions that we had. So project assessment procedures, there's thousands of tools, some of which you will have come across, some of which you've never come across, but there's processes and tools that you can use when planning and running a project that really help you to know your community, to know those who are other key stakeholders or people who have a vested interest to help or to hinder you. Document your actions, create sustainability or scale, which all of these can help you consistently measure what you do. It doesn't need the capacity and resources of big, expensive, independent companies coming in and evaluating, which is always the fear of some of the big European projects. It costs a lot to do an impact assessment in that case. But for us, it can be just as small as measuring the difference of differences. It's really quite simple for us. It's just about putting these things into place. The tool, all of these tools, theory of chain, results chain, these are all things that I've taken out of a really great initiative called the Grassroots Collective process. It's very comprehensive, step by step. There are examples and explanations from different communities, and well worth trying. So even just take one of your projects, try running it through this system and see what it helps you do. There will be things that you want to adapt. There will things that you already know. You may not need to do a stakeholder map because you've already done it, or you're halfway through another project, or you're taking on another project that's going on from a project that you already had. But just try it. So a theory of change is a description of how an intervention is supposed to deliver the desired results. It describes the causal logic of how and why a particular initiative or program modality or design innovation will reach its intended outcomes. A theory of change is really key to underpinning any impact evaluation, given the cause and effect focus of the research. So then the last thing you would always end up is what we call the log frame. So it's the logical framework, and it's a clearly articulated results chain, which provides a useful map for selecting the indicators that will be measured along the whole chain. They will include indicators used both to monitor the program implementation, if you like, or the project, and to evaluate the results. And you can use it to consult all the stakeholders in the community, in policy, and in research. Identify indicators all along the results chain and not just at the level of the outcomes, so that you'll be able to track the causal logic of any project outcomes that are observable. So this log frame is kind of a 4x4 matrix, provides a concise and strategic summary of a project's goals, activities, assumptions, indicators, and sources of verification. So you can measure and report the achievements and objectives, and then of course you can improve change scale and even get more funding. The Grassroots Collective process is great because it really walks you through step by step, and it's easier to adapt. You can take pieces out of it and help your decision making. You can take pieces out of it to show your funders, and it's always good to thrash your assumptions, I think. Anyway, there's also a few elements like gender analysis, which may not always be relevant in our context, but I think it's quite a good tool for determining, say, like the power dynamics in a project. Because we've already said there's no point having effective patient engagement if the patient advocates cannot speak up or don't have the training or capacity to contribute meaningfully, because we know that's just co-option. So the tools that we have adapted in the process that we've been using in iToBoS, I think in many cases you can get away with a stakeholder analysis and just a theory of change to build up impact measurement criteria. In our case, we've been working on understanding the dynamics, interests, and values of the wider cancer community for years, and adapting tools like the power and interest stakeholder management quadrant that you see in the bottom left there. And then our patient pathways supply the stakeholders we need involved in any change that we want to achieve. We've been doing patient maps for a long time and iterating all the time. The partnership canvas process has led to some great conversations, improvements in understanding between us and researchers. We actually even found out values which even the participants or ourselves hadn't appreciated that we brought to this project. And then we mapped our whole engagement in research process. And then we do look at projects and decide whether they're a good use of our time and skills and relevant to the community with the little diagram on the bottom right there. Can we test these tools on real projects? And as the PO, the patient organization involved in running Work Package 11 on patient engagement, we'd be failing ourselves and the intention of the EU to bring citizens and patients and end users into EU research projects if we didn't make an attempt at impact assessment from the perspective of the patient community. We know from our work on the partnership canvases over the years that it's very hard to get people to say what they value in collaborations with us, other stakeholders. And we already know that nobody tells patient organizations when they're not good enough to be useful. And we also know that other stakeholders mistake what we want out of the collaboration, or they have not thought as broad as translating the efforts into health system changes that we need to end our sort of death and life impact from cancer. It's always an honest negotiation and compromise to get a balance in the wins for everyone. So these are some pictures of events that we've done using some of these tools, from lean advocacy all the way across to the tool that you see here that is from the Grassroots Collective that we did at our conference this year. This is a list of things to think about. And don't forget that the fact that terms like toolkit, roadmap, process all get used, it just shows that these kind of social impact assessments are still developing and you can develop them further. And it also means that this is not in itself a guarantee of success, nor indeed a guarantee that the right questions will even be asked. And it will be different every time. So even on large scale projects, it only helps to frame the examination of any policy or advocacy proposals in a consistent way and keep asking the right questions. But it's well worth putting something that works for you and your projects in place, even if it forces you to just test your assumptions, check your stakeholder relationships, and of course, help you to write up a report, because that's something we're always really bad at. This is a little bit of references that I've taken from that you can use. And there's a few other slides on the deck that might help with getting an impact assessment started. So that's me there. Thanks for listening and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Gilly. That was great. It's always nice to see how your thinking has evolved since the last time and how you're building and, you know, how we do make progress, actually. So any questions for Gilly now?
It's not that scary.
we
do owe it to ourselves.
Can I ask something? Although we work together and it's a bit like a question that probably I know the answer. I was wondering now, as an impact in iToBoS, because we start with our project. But what always struck me was like, okay, we are going to develop a whole body scanner for our high risk people, but there are already on the market other scanners that could be, I don't know, more or less better or inferior to that. So maybe one of our, let's say, proof of impact will be we will succeed to have something better for our people or something that is at least equal. And for that, I think our involvement in the clinical trials that is running actually within the project it's something that is essential. So I think we can put more focus on the clinical part, besides that, our artificial intelligence and all the data interpretation that comes with the tool itself. So what do you think about that?
But I think that's exactly
but it's difficult to measure the impact in this area, as we know.
No, but I think we certainly can. I mean, I think if you even just look at small impacts that we have had on the design of the prototype, I mean, you know, it's a negotiation. We want this. Somebody else says, well, it's not possible technically, but you know, just putting that in there, having people think that patients will not like doing this because it's enclosed. Patients will not like having this kind of examination because they have to lie on their back and turn over. You know, all of the things that we've already input into the project, these are all impacts, and I think we should be already recording this. You know, what has gone into the project that we wanted. This has got to be from a patient perspective. I think the whole way along the project, I think the discussions into AI and how our data is used, and how that if our data is secure, if we're confident, you know, are people confident about sharing their data? You know, is it, you know, when they sign the informed consent, are they going to be saying, yes, everything's been explained to me. I know it's not going to go any further than this. I know it's going to be anonymized. You know, it's all these kind of things. Are people confident to share their data? You know, we will see that along the trials that are running with this project as to whether people are happy to do that. Now, we know there's plenty of people happy just altruistically, but you know, it's much better to end up with a product at the end that has good AI, good security, good data protection, that even if you don't take the prototype forward, because you know, I also think there's benefits in the prototype that we're using that other big machines do not have. I mean, the liquid lenses and all of these kind of things and the detail, because in the end, patients want to know that they're being monitored well enough so that this sort of Damocles they always have over their heads that manages, you know, that doesn't allow them to live their life properly will be much better managed. So they can say, yes, we're using a machine. The AI is going to be really great at bringing up the risk that you have. The AI is going to be really great at flagging up something that you need to come in for and get dealt with. People will be so much more relaxed. You know, and if that then can be put into the system, which is always the hardest thing, because that's the thing at the end, that's the thing that people have to buy the machine, they have to have the space for the machine, they have the capacity to run the machine, that all has to work too. So that's why I think we're very good here saying, oh yes, but will that actually work? Will clinicians actually input data? Will, you know, all of these things that we can, you know, add to the project. And I think these are all things that we need to measure to check whether there's been impact in the project or not. Obviously, all the other stakeholders in the project are going to have their own idea of the impact we have had. I know from the other projects we've done, when Bettina went round and said, well, what good did we bring into the project? It was, well, you guys were good because you were difficult. Yeah, that's kind of a positive thing, but that's measuring from our perspective. And I think it's the whole, in the end, it's a little bit like that triangle of change that we have. It's that changing minds thing, that kind of, you know, grudging acceptance that there are things that, you know, we can help with that actually make it better for everyone, and the value of the whole project goes up. And if you can get up to that peak of actually changing the system, you know, that's the ultimate thing. But unfortunately, all of these things are usually steps. You know, it's the low-hanging fruit, and then the next thing, and then the education, and then going slowly further up until we actually achieve something that pretty much everyone in the project values. Another question.
So just like, I think Anna put a comment into the chat. Anna, do you have a question? Otherwise, I have one, of course.
Yeah. Hello. Many congratulations, Gilly, for the presentation. I found it really inspiring and touching. So thank you very much for this. I was wondering, what specific outcome measures do you usually use to quantify basically your success in the advocacy work that you do? And do you think that such metrics could be standardized and could be used for multiple patient organizations, for example?
I think for the same reasons that even big projects where impact assessment is compulsory, when you see the difficulties they have with identifying criteria, measurement criteria, we are just at the very beginning of it. We're still trying to establish what impact is it for us in our community. And I mean, there's the easy-ish ones in that, you know, are people getting more engaged? Are people getting more educated? Are people then able to be a patient advocate that's in a place where they wouldn't have been before because they didn't have the technology or the capacity to do so before? There's those what I call slightly low hanging fruit ones, but you have to start somewhere. I think when you actually want to measure if you had impact in how the consortia or how the project or how in our case the prototype was designed, I think you can see, you know, you can measure, we asked for this, we didn't get it, we did get it, those kind of things. Those are also quite, but this is why you have to map your procedure because then you can say tick or no tick, or could work harder on this. But there is no, you know, if you look through the literature, there's lots of papers saying, yes, patient involvement is really useful and really helpful. But when you actually get into the nitty gritty of what makes it, it is always on that quite low hanging fruit level. And I think it's up to us as patient organizations to start to develop our own tools, because this is about what the community values. It's not about what somebody else tells us is of value. So it's a way of looking at things, and I think if we all just start doing it, we'll start coming up with relevant measurement criteria. And we haven't been very good at doing this in the past because we've just been rubbish really at reporting ourselves, and you know, and bringing this out to the whole community. But again, it's another thing that we can work together across cancer organizations to do. So yeah, looking forward to that too.
And just to complete here a bit, some outcomes are really hidden. For example, if you go into the project, you can look for access to the network of specialists for your patient communities. So you want to have people to access to ask a question about a difficult situation, difficult case in our community. So this is actually benefits on site, which are really important for us. So maybe the main goal of the project, it's the main goal of the project, but you do give such a way to these benefits that are in the mind of other people, collateral for us are very important.
I think this entire exercise, sorry, just like maybe a little bit of history, why we ended up actually drafting this work package in the first place was the experience with previous projects where people actually came back to us and said it was so helpful that you were there. And then when we asked why exactly was that helpful, they couldn't answer the question. And this is actually when we got the answer, because I got the answer, you're always so difficult. And I was like, well, that's not helpful, is it? And then the answer was, and then he said, like, yeah, but afterwards things got better somehow. So that was also still not very concrete. But this is kind of what intrigued us, because we had all of a sudden, well, we've always had too much work, but we got approached by people who we had met within the project and who came back for feedback. And we tried to understand what was valuable also, of course, in the idea, like, if this is helpful already, maybe we can get even better at it. Maybe we can have an even larger contribution. So this is how it all started, that we started thinking about. So we apparently, and this is also the thing that is also like a next question for Gilly. So the thing that I struggle with is that we have an idea where we want to go in terms of change. And then we try to map out the steps, how to get there. Anything big that has really come out for us in MPNE has been always a side product of something else we had planned. So if we're not careful by being too focused on the planning, we miss the biggest pieces. So I've been doing some digging at the side in my other life, and apparently this is a quite classic thing in complex systems where you have emergence of things. So I think we are looking at emergence of new opportunities, of new possibilities that happened because of something that we did, but that we did not pre-plan. So that is something that I think we have to, that's why we did this mapping, this squiggle thing, where we just tried to map it down. So for me, so by now, because we've been doing this now for a couple of years, we've always been observing how we work and see what happens on the environment around us and whether it changes or whether something happens. I think some of that is or actually not some of it. I think a lot of that is very specifically linked to our personal expertise and experience. So I think people come for us now a lot, and Gilly has already alluded to that, is implementation. Because we have been following medical products, mainly drugs, but also medical devices, especially our uveal melanoma colleagues have been looking at devices. We have seen how difficult it is to get these to patients. So we have actually on the backside of following these problems developed quite a bit of knowledge about implementation. So what does it take to get something to patients? And now people come to us to ask us about that. To whom should we talk? Have you, so that kind of thing. I think that is one part. Then another one is science. So because I have a scientific background, so that's something that I get a lot. Now, increasingly grant writing. So people come to us because they know that we're talking about impact and impact assessments, and that we're developing tools and that we have methods. So people are coming for that as well. So I think there is this I think we're getting to something where we kind of know or get more of this, what people value about us there, where we change something, where we contribute something that has then an impact further down the line. But one of the reasons we're also having this webinar is we want a forum of discussions. We would like to hear what other people are thinking, what they are doing, how they are reflecting about their progress. Because I think that Gilly's point was very well made, is we have to start looking ourselves. We cannot leave it to others to determine what the impact is for them. We also have to think about whether we achieve what we set out to do. So Gilly, maybe you have any thoughts on this emergence, on these great things that happened, but that we didn't see or didn't expect coming. So do you have any thoughts on that and how to deal with that?
Well, I think this is what we've been doing all along. I mean, when we do our workshops on, say, the partnership canvas, this is when these things get thrown up, because it's only when you kind of talk honestly and somebody can say, no, you're wrong, which we know it's difficult for people to say that to patients and patient advocates because they're so grateful that we're here, kind of thing. We also have to merit being there as well. And I think that's something that we have to build on and grow with, because I think if you want to fall over these opportunities, you have to keep talking honestly across all the stakeholders. And we all know that you can have a fantastic machine coming out of iToBoS that has extremely good optics that picks up everything you need to pick up, but if you're not getting that into the system at the end, what it's worth nothing to us. It's a little bit like clinical trials that look amazing but now nobody can access. It's that invention and not innovation. So I think as a community we need to work on that a little bit. We have to educate ourselves, and we know that this is the case, is that there's no shortcut to knowledge, so we have to get involved. And I certainly have learnt through iToBoS a lot more of the technical side of things than I expected, and it's good. It's a good brain airing, and I think it's only when you do things like that you actually see where these other opportunities are, whether it's to lead on to another project or whether it's just to really dig down into the project that you're working on already to get something that's a better outcome than it could have been. But it's all about talking across all of the stakeholders, finding those cross points and those interest points, and I think that's something that we're certainly getting better at. But it needs collaboration, communication, all of the usual things. Any more questions?
Or maybe some reflections, because I know that there's some on the call who have done these canvases in April at MPNE. I know that some were there. Anyone who has worked through that, any thoughts?
Or anyone who has better ideas.
Yeah,
we're all just learning. Yeah, we're always looking for better ideas too.
I have only one question. So this is the second session that I'm participating. The first one was earlier today with the data privacy. And I was thinking of what you said about measuring patient engagement. So if there is a physical event, you can see if they show up. Is it okay to ask them to complete a feedback form afterwards with marking some things that were on the agenda to check their interest and what they will use after that, and maybe leave some comments to be filled. And also, I will give you an example from my need. I found a lot of information in the melanoma patient group in Romania. the studies, the information, what I have to do, recommendations for doctors, everything. What I would like to see is some statistics from the patients, from 100 persons in the community, how many are stage 3, stage 2, and for how long are they in that stage. But this is the personal information. Would it be okay to ask them to complete, if they want, voluntarily, like a Google Sheet, to collect this kind of information? Because it would be useful for me and maybe for others. When you enter in that place, you search for information. How critical is my stage? What is my survival rate? How are my chances? What should I do next? It would be helpful. But I don't know, is it ethical to ask them to complete such a form? It would be very easy to complete it, to ask. It's just a link, a form, they complete it, and we have the data, and we do a report without giving any details.
Well, we do this anyway. I mean, when we have our conferences, we ask people all of those things. You have to be very careful that the data is private and you're only using it for those things and they've consented to it. But we do that anyway. We know our conferences are more than half stage 4 patients, because that's where the need is. We actually seeing, as our treatments in a way move into stage 3 and earlier, we are seeing more of those patients coming in. So we absolutely do monitor these metrics, partly for ourselves, but also so that we actually put things in the program that is relevant for those people, because that's super important. I don't know, Bettina.
That's more monitoring. So this is a little bit more monitoring our own audience. So we want to know for whom we basically preparing a program, as Gilly said, and we have usually something between 60 and 70%, a little bit depending on the program, advanced melanoma. And that at the beginning was stage 4. Now we have stage 4, stage 3 advanced. So this is like our audience is totally non-representative, because you know that normally the proportion of advanced melanoma is thankfully much lower. So we're monitoring for that kind of thing, but that's just the audience. I think you were more interested in long-term like trajectories. I know that Violetta, your group, has already done something like this. They started a Google Sheet, which was like a total privacy nightmare, and Abigail would have, been really upset with us. But I don't think it went any further, because everyone wants to have the data, but no one wants to complete it. And then to keep it updated is, of course, a problem. So what we have done and what we have tested in our own community, this is now going a little bit away from this impact discussion, is that what works quite well in our community is snapshots. So if you do like a survey and you capture data, you will get a quite good overview of what is going on in our community, fully knowing that we're not representative. So we are like the more active ones, we are more female, more educated. So all that taking into account. What doesn't work, at least what we haven't made, what hasn't worked for us, is tracking. So because people have lives and,
evolution.
So the evolution is that. Also from that, if I were to trust that type of data, I would like to have not the bias in there that we have in our communities. So that is why we have been engaging so much in real world evidence. And if that's a topic you're interested in, would be happy to take you along. So that's why we're so involved like with Get Real already for years. So following real world evidence, health records. So where you have official data, where you track everyone and not just a selected group, that you have actually reliable information. So I think one has to be a bit like selective. Our communities are super good for sentinels, because these are activated people. These are people who are driving things. They will report things earlier than someone else. So we are very good at picking up signals of things that go wrong, of something that is great, new opportunities. We are very good at that. We are not good at covering, so as in everyone, and having a representative overview, because we are not representative. That's why we do other work to address that issue. But Violetta, I know that your community had such a Google Sheet. I remember that. Do you want to say something about it?
Well, it was indeed a very enthusiastic start, and we didn't manage to get to 60 subscribers. And after we made everything more or less anonymized, which I think now was pseudo-anonymized, because I could very well track the email of everybody. So I'm sorry to say that, but was just a try. And this was also coming from volunteers like Roxana, coming just in force into the organization and saying, we should do that, because I will have this outcome and I will see the whole project and how long these people survive in a certain stage. First of all, people are filling once the data and then they are not coming back. then they want to stare to the results of others, but they are not feeling at all their own situation. And then there is no reporting on when the event actually happened, when the patient died. Nobody's coming for that back. It's a huge impact, psychological impact. So it's not a great example, but it's just an example to show where not to put the effort. Because people are in love with registries, are in love with show me what happened from this to this. But these all are highly regulated and done in a way to eliminate bias, like you said, Bettina, or you just try it for fun and then you just to learn something. And from that we learn, but that we cannot go further than what we obtain a snapshot of, I don't know, 6 months. And I would like to move a little bit the discussion now. What do you think about having a patient review board evaluating actually which is independent, evaluating actually the patient involvement in the certain project? Because I am in some projects, large projects, in Netherlands, for example. People came, it's from the researcher side, the proposal with this patient review board. So actually it's somebody above us who is looking to us, to the interaction between researchers and patient advocacy groups to judge if you had an impact or not. I don't know what to think about that, but I didn't feel completely happy with this.
But that is because someone else is coming with their criteria of what is successful. So they will be establishing some measurement criteria that's saying this is what good patient engagement looks like. And we know that what we think is good patient engagement is slightly different. Sometimes it's the same, but often it's different. So this is why we have to come up with a criteria of what is important, what impact actually is in our community. And I think, just going back to the discussion that you were having before, I think what our community is really good at is what you see in kind of business and startups and things, which is early adopters. We are very good at being the early adopters. We have to spend some time then making sure that others in the community, people who are less educated, if you like, who have put less time into it, who have been less fortunate, are pulled up along. So we now have in our community people starting to say, so how secure is my data? That would never have necessarily happened before, because everyone was told that it was altruistic of them to give their data. Whereas now this is changing. So I think as a community of early adopters, we are very good. We are not representative of the whole patient community, but we're good at that. So it's something to be worked on. So I think it's ultimately good for us to be doing this criteria of success in patient engagement, because we are the early adopters. And I think we also have a very good kind of vision across all of the different stakeholders, from what the people who have to implement things into health services to the researchers who are developing prototypes or clinical trials or early products. So I think see us as early adopters, and we will make the criteria that we think is valuable.
But Violetta, I think that what we developed in Berlin, like not this year, but last year, actually, this diamond where we kind of started stratifying patient engagement into these 4 different areas, where you have like outreach and awareness, which is more like a transparency and accountability towards society that finally finances research. So that was one area. Then we had this area of user involvement. If it is about product design or service design, you want something that is interesting and relevant to the user. So that is another type of engagement that's very different from outreach and awareness. And then we had this area of citizen science, which is still underused in health. So that's why I think it's exciting to go into it, but where citizens are participating and where you basically use the scale to generate insight and data that you couldn't use or couldn't generate otherwise. So I think that's a different type of participation in research and engagement. And then we had the last quadrant, which was how do we get better research? And then you, of course, have to define and start defining what is better research. And this is what we are now currently working on, that the hypothesis is CRISP and like actually accurately reflects the original problem, that the design of the project is both appropriate but also optimal, so that you don't lose time on things that you could have kind of avoided, and then that the implementation and the transition and the implementation after sites works. So I think these are areas against which we can measure impact. So where we say that we want, if you have a fantastic research project that has a huge translational potential, but you don't take care of the steps that you need to take on afterwards, then you kind of have a problem. So you lose that fantastic research because you basically haven't anticipated things. And I think we are spending now more and more time on these things. So I think is the first question for me, if someone wants to evaluate, is like, where are you? So what type of output do you want to see? So what is the intention with this engagement? And then I do think one can evaluate against that and how one has delivered. Keeping in mind what we had discussed earlier on, that the best things happen at the side of it. So I often think if you just have one interaction and you send a survey, I don't think you capture what is truly going on. We always have these odd discussions. You meet someone at a conference, you bump into them at the cafe. It's just this serendipity where, and after our conferences, months later, people say, oh, we met at your conference. Now we are running this project. That's huge impact, but it's nothing that we capture. So, I think. So, but I totally get why you're uncomfortable with that. I also struggle, like especially if you just get to read a piece and you don't even, and the worst I think is if they just give you the half page of patient engagement and you don't get to see the grant and you're supposed to judge anything by that. I mean, I refuse to do that now. So if I don't get the full project and the full budget, because in the end, this is where you see how honest it is. If anyone can, be very eloquent on half a page. But if there's no money attached to it, it's never going to happen. So, I check actually how much budget or how large the percentage of the budget is that they associate with patient engagement as a very simple and very honest factor of whether there's any serious intention behind it.
And I think it's the same with clinical trials. I mean, when we get asked to review clinical trials and you're there because you want to contribute to the patient engagement of it, you need to see the whole trial. You need to be able to look at it all the way through and say, these are the things that are going to impact. These are the things that you're going to come back to us later and say, can you help us recruit, that you could have done and changed and modified in the first place. So I think all of these things we have to educate ourselves. We have to get better at doing it. And but I agree, it's having some measures of what you will do and what you won't do as well.
But maybe that was already the answer. Sorry, Gilly, maybe that was the answer. Maybe we have to look in any specific case, look at what are the potential domains of impact. So what are where would the impact relevant, and then judge what is planned against that. Does this have a chance to contribute to this, yes or no? I think maybe that's a way to think about it.
I think that's a good, but we shouldn't also stop the interactions of other stakeholders that may also do something useful. So just because it doesn't necessarily involve us as a patient, because that aspect of it just doesn't come into our scope, then we should be careful not to write it off because it could still be useful to us.
And let's recognize it's also huge work there that is adding to our already efforts to our efforts. It's just documentation. You should document step by step, like in your presentation, Gilly was one of the methods, but you need to have this baseline from what point I just started and where I am now. Did I reach what I wanted to reach? I was in this meeting, what I said, just document it. Did something change because I was in that meeting, and how this was perceived? Is this documented by the consortium somewhere? Because sometimes you have surprises that you spoke a lot in a meeting, but you don't have your name on the minutes. So your your presence is actually not documented in the official papers of the project. So big attention to these small things, because small things are making at the end a big difference. So I started doing that, and it's adding to the efforts, I must recognize.
And it helps you follow up too, because if that's already documented, you can then follow up on that. This changed that. Have you done anything more about it in your next project? Have you included it in your next project because this worked? Those are the things that we have to get good at.
I mean, I think the ironic thing about this is that we're all scientifically trained. So we have been writing lab books for years of our lives, and we've just taken it for granted that you document your experiments in a lab. But now in our work, we haven't done it. And now what we start is effectively documenting. I mean, this is just qualitative work, or this is exactly what we're doing now, what we started thinking about. This is what we did. This is what came out of it. And then this happened and this happened. And then one does start recognizing patterns. But I agree. And well, work, it adds work, yes and no. I think it feels maybe like adding to it. On the other hand, doing things that are not useful and that don't contribute to impact, I think that is a waste of time. So, and how do we know what to stop if we don't know what works? So I think it's that type of circular, how is that? The definition of insanity is doing more of the same and expecting different results. So we shouldn't be doing that. So we have to find a way to stop the things that are not delivering for us.
Yeah,
so
and I think we see it a lot also in people. I mean, people want to cope with their disease. Sometimes they're coping with their disease is doing an initiative, going and preaching to people on the beaches about sun or raising money or anything like that. But what I would like to see our community do is follow that through. So don't just raise money. Make sure that the money that you're raising is going to something that is useful to the community, which means sometimes you have to educate yourself a little bit about what the research is. We need fundamental research, but at the same time, I want fundamental research to have a long look all the way down the channel that they could possibly go to say where this could be translational, where this could actually impact patients in the end. So it's no good just sitting there studying your zebrafish with nothing coming out the end. So, I think, and that's where I think an educated patient community can really say, hey, but what are you thinking of? How is it going to help the patients? And that's always the thing in the end. How is this going to help the patients?
Agree. I think
Hello.
we could do this for another. Hello.
Karen, hi, from the other end of the world. Great to see you.
It's 11:30 at night here.
I know, really appreciate it.
I hope you have realized that we put Claire on very early tomorrow for us, but we thought that it gives you a chance to join.
Oh yes, yes. That clashes with the other part of my life. So, so sometimes these are really good. So I had a couple of questions. One is, so I have recently been become involved in an enhanced consumer engagement or patient engagement for health technology assessment, which is really exciting. And we've got a pretty, there's 5 patients or 5 consumers who have various lived experience who are all fairly pushy. None of us were sitting back quietly today at our first meeting. One of my things, because I also chair Cancer Voices in my state that I live in, and noticing, and you mentioned it earlier, we're all women, we're all white, we're all, from a particular level with their education, that sort of thing. Have you looked at how you might gather information from and they've actually labelled this group of people in Australia as the hard to reach people.
Okay.
So I always put inverted commas around it, but have you contemplated that? Just thinking about, how diet would be different, how lifestyle would be different. Some of them are, like 2nd or 3rd generation unemployed, but they still need the same treatments that we need. They still need, but will it be different for them? Will it be different because they've got comorbidities that aren't taken into account in our areas? And so I suppose justifying why I need to go and dig these people up anyway, and then how do I?
I think that's really, I mean, in Europe, we do a lot of, representation to HTA, and we use our whole community to put things in, to get people's opinions and ideas and risk benefit analysis into this thing. And that does include people with lots of differences. And I think that's the advantage of like country forums, because you should, you know, as long as you've done your outreach and as long as you've made welcome these people. But then, yeah, it's not easy to access everyone because some people aren't even online. And if you're an online forum, that doesn't work. So I think it's something that we all have to think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Karen, I mean, this is just like one of the really, really tough questions. So, I mean, something that we've been struggling with it for a long time. So first, I think it's always, you know, like, how do you deal with the hard to reach? Well, the problem is that you haven't reached them usually. So they're not there. So I think this is the first one. So there's something that we have been trying to do is like, that's why we're also asking when people apply for our conferences, we ask, for example, for their profession. So that, and that in a way is an indicator of educational background, so socioeconomic status, of course. Also, our conferences are in English, so we usually have a very, very high degree of education. So we're trying to control for it. So whatever we think or what we see in our community, we can say, okay, we have 20 countries in the room, but this is a socioeconomically very, you know, just like privileged group. So we try to phrase our statements within the limitations we have picked up. So as a first step, so that we're trying not to speak on behalf of the people who are not in the room. That obviously does not help with those who are not there, but at least it puts like kind of, you know, a limitation on what we think and the way we present it. So I'm very uncomfortable speaking on behalf of or whatever, because that is very, you know, it's just like, I think it's very, you know, we're not everyone. We have a view on the world. And we have, for example, worked with the EMA, so the European Medicines Agencies, on risk-benefit trade-offs and preferences. And we're now to do some more work on it, thanks to another EU project. So that I've just gotten the proposal. So we're trying to do more of that type of work to try to really understand and get a scientific understanding of it. Because, you know, if you have a single voice, you will always have an outlier in a way. So I'd like to try to do a little bit to get more the data and try to kind of capture it and then to kind of go deeper. Because once you can see that there are groups that have these and these characteristics, then you can reach out to them and can say, we have seen the differences, and then you know kind of whom to look for, because otherwise you don't look for someone who's different, and then you don't know, is that an important difference, or is that is that just someone who just looks different, but otherwise it's just still like that. So I think it's like, you know, taking this like an onion, peeling the layers and trying to really get into what there is.
And I think maybe it's the very nice idea, a useful idea, just to be coordinating such a project. If you propose it, Karen, I think as a patient organization, we can we can be also coordinator of a project, even across ocean. So we can have our proposal in this area. Of course, we need more experience in dealing with large projects, probably. But it's like Bettina said, you cannot do that out of a project. You should start to collaborate with people. You should start or your own project or to look around there what kind of proposal are in this area of socially disadvantaged people. And I think it's a very, very good idea, actually, to look into these communities, because we have a lot in the Eastern European countries as well. And when you compare, there is disadvantage and disadvantage. What is disadvantage group in Netherlands? It's having another connotation in Romania. So yes.
And ask for the impact back. You know, you can always do that. I mean, HTA is a bit more difficult. I don't know, in France, all the transcripts of the HTA decisions or just deliberations are out there and free. So you can go through it and say, oh, yes, that's what we asked for, and this is what they've given us. So absolutely, you need to ask for the feedback back as to what good you brought.
And sometimes just to briefly build on that, something that we started at a discussion a long time ago and never really followed up. So our problem cases, if you like, are old single men, right? We know wherever you go, it's always it's older men who are single, who have the thick melanomas and worse outcomes. So we've been discussing with our colleagues from the prostate community, for example, because they have a similar kind of, there's an overlap in terms of population. So I think that might be something for all of us to consider. So thinking, but that goes back in knowing who has worse outcomes and have an idea, so how to reach that group and maybe find then collaborations, because I think that would increase the impact of what we're doing, because it would help us to reach these where we know that outcomes are worse. That's not a real answer to your question to how can we be
That's an idea, though.
You know?
No, it is. And
joining us, just to say that.
But it's just lovely having that discussion and listening to what you're speaking about, and thinking, oh yes, okay, well maybe I could do that. The other thing I was thinking of, and I've probably got more of a sense of it now, but when you're doing a project or when you're evaluating how well you've done, how many people would normally be involved in that?
It depends on the project. It depends on the project. I mean, I would always try and assign someone to be responsible for sort of looking at that all the way through. So like your baseline and then all the way through. But you know, you can be one, you can be several. It depends on your capacities a little bit too. But I think just basic ability to do an impact assessment is in anyone's remit. One person can do it simply, lots of people can do it more complex.
So we always do this kind of, for example, after conferences, like we always ask, well, we haven't been a bit sloppy lately, but after conferences, we always ask people for suggestions, but I think we are our worst own critics. So usually what we have is we have a run sheet parallel to the event, where we start from the things that didn't go well. So we document it, especially the things that didn't work. We'll never do that again. That was terrible, too late, to this, to that. And then we review it before the next event. So we always have this kind of, was this the best that it could go and what can go better? It's not about being, negative. It's just, you can always improve, and it would be a missed opportunity not to do it better the next time if you have to observe. So this is what we've always been doing, And as Gilly said, the proper impact assessment is more work, but this kind of simple following and reflecting on, was that right? Did that go right? Did that go as expected? Did something unexpected happen? I think is helpful to just, move faster, maybe. That's why
as I just said, even just, making sure your name's on the minutes.
Yeah. This is something that Violetta picked up. Because if it's not, you haven't been there, right? It's simple things like that. And that actually also contributes to impact, by the way.
Yes.
Also to be correctly cited. I don't know whether you've noted that, but often patient advocates are not correctly cited. So you want to make sure that the way you are cited is actually what you said. So that's another piece of contributing to impact. So being in the notes, but correctly so. Everyone here, it is already past 4, so we thought that 45 minutes would be a very good time for a late afternoon slot. But we could probably keep talking. Are there any last burning questions for Gilly? Otherwise, I would like to close this webinar now, and we can always set up another one. Maybe we should have an MPNE meetup. It has been a while. Any last questions for Gilly?
Hi, I will be quick, I promise.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you. Just a reflection. I've myself been trying to think about this and what is impact, and this perspective of the community is really an interesting point. And for instance, imagine a project that has the main goal to produce some innovation, okay? You know that it will be successful if this innovation really appears up at the end. But imagine 2 types of situations. The project ends, you don't have that innovation, but you learned a lot and evolved a lot. And even from the bad lessons, you learned a lot and improved. And another situation, you have the product at the end, so it will benefit the users, but you were not very well involved and you didn't learn much. So 2 ways of seeing impact, right? Because in one side you had the final product, yay, a lot of people will use it, but there are another types of criteria that will not considered. So should criteria have different ways, or should some type of impacts be more valuable than the others? I don't know. It's just a reflection. Indeed, it's not easy to to know what to consider better. But it can have really different outcomes, and even if you don't have the main goal concluded, you can have a lot of other things that were impactful in the main way. So I don't know, how do you consider this? Even if you didn't achieve the main goal, but you learned a lot, even from the bad experiences, or no, this is not the right way to think about it?
I would say that the EU doesn't like us to be learning on their time. So, to be able to say in a project, oh, we learned a lot, isn't really cutting it when it comes to their assessment. So, while it's really valuable to us. Yeah,
yes,
but for us,
for you,
absolutely.
Because,
yeah. But like I had on the slide, the little diagram, the kind of organogram type thing that we had as to how we decide whether we're going to be involved in the project. First of all, it has to be useful to patients. It has to. That's our first thing, and then there will be various things. Do we get do we learn from it? That also has a big weight for us. It may not necessarily for the project.
Could you pull it up again? Does that work? Could you pull it? So we have it on our, it's called return on engagement. It's like impact is maybe something slightly different, but we call it return on engagement. And it has been like basically just as you said, like maybe you can you make it bigger somehow? It's like even I
don't think I can. This is big.
Return, yeah.
So, but it's just like I have actually written a blog on it. You find it also on our website. But it is basically the different domains and this is not, this is not prescriptive, or this is not, definitive. Someone else might have other kind of things that that they consider important. Maybe I can, because I've written it, I should know what I've written years ago. So I think, one of the domain is true impact on patients. So does this make a difference for our community? And this is, of course, something that is always very important for us. Then there are the other domains I had, like transferable expertise, knowledge, and skills is also important. So probably if we had to trade off, but I think the trade-off always depends on how harsh it is. Then we have funding, because of course that's also an important one. And then we have non-tangible benefits like exposure or reputation or network, which is neither skills nor funding nor direct income. But I mean, this is like where we think about, is this something that is valuable for us? But I think the way is, because we work in, this is now totally off topic, but the way we work is very similar to mission-driven innovation. So we have our overall, we all want to make a difference in melanoma, and that is what ties us together. Though we work in very different areas, and we're interested in different stages, and some are more interested in prevention or early detection, and others are more interested in advanced disease. But because we all kind of unite under making a difference, we kind of are like a carpet with very different like expertise and interest put together, and it's because of that diversity that we're moving so much. But these are kind of the things that benefit all of us. So what came out of this kind of so as long as what comes out contributes to this overarching direction, I would say it would be benefit for us, and we would consider it as impactful for us as community.
Of course, it's just because you're saying that you were looking for the community's view, and the community is heterogeneous as well. So yes. What can be more impactful for a person that is not that well educated, they can benefit from a process that is more engaging, and you will learn more and be more educated, than a person that is already very well trained and is more focused at the final end of the project because it really understands the need of this new innovation.
The point is that capacity building in an organization, it's actually leading to achieving the mission that you create, that you just defined for your organization or for your community, is depending what you are, a group or an organization. Mm-hmm. So I do think that indeed is a benefit, and it's not black and white. There are different nuances in outcomes. You can be happy that you, like we said before, you learned something. You can be happy that you have access to a network and you help, I don't know, maybe 5 patients or 50 patients or 100 patients with the access to the network that you have. You can be happy because, for example, you got to have the next step in implementation of that thing that didn't reach the minor outcome of that specific project. On the other hand, what I wanted to say, and is in line with everybody said, if there is no impact of what we are doing, and still we have at the end the product that we are happy with, I will say spare your efforts and where you are needed.
Very true. Take it and run with it.
Yeah. So we are happy if something is coming up with, because our resources are limited. And if something is coming perfect up there without our self putting the effort in, that is great.
Yeah, I get it.
I think one has to separate the two different things. I mean, the entry point of this webinar was self-reflection in a way, so impact of our own action. So this is self-reflective on, did I put basically my effort in the right way into the right place? So this is the reflection that I see this independently of the success of a project to which we hopefully contribute something, because otherwise if we don't contribute, there's no reason for us to be there, at least in my opinion. But that I see this differently, because as Violetta said, you know, there are other people who contribute something, and if they can solve the problem without us having to do anything, I would be very happy as well. So I think one has to separate the two. So it's more, so did we contribute, and how did we contribute? And is that in line with our overarching mission? And did it contribute to the success of the project? So I think this is a little bit how one should layer it in. But I think also, like, you know, also to a previous exchange, I think at this point we are far away from being able to put metrics on it. I think we rather value actually it as a qualitative or reflective stage. So also this return on engagement is not absolute. It's more about thinking about it and reflecting on it and deciding whether it was appropriate, yes or no, or whether you would like to have more or less of it. So it's not about, you know, the right answer. It is more about reflecting on the way we work and to make sure, or like to be able to correct if we see that things go off track. I think that is more how I would like to see this.
Okay.
You know, kind of like used or thought about.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Fantastic, actually.
Hello.
I've been admiring the conversation, and I think that last comment just invited me to think about time, because I was thinking about things that were hinted at. What if we have feedback into a project that didn't make it to the end product because of technology constraints, and then therefore we didn't get that wonderful thing we wanted, but at the same time, you know, how about the things that we didn't think were major in contribution that after a couple of years turned out to be enormous? So I was just thinking, okay, how should we look at time in the context of things?
It's one of our major headaches together with this emergence. So, you know, for example, just like 2 days ago, we got the notification that a follow-on project from UMCure, where we have met some here, so that was our first EU project ever, actually has been granted. And so there's funding for a new research project that is a direct, like it's an impact, and we are involved as MPNE. So that's an impact of an impact of an impact if one wants, and it's the first project has ended. And of course, if you do an impact assessment at the end of a project, you're never going to see that. But I still think that in a collective thinking, we should have these things on our radar that, you know, like, but in a way, I think you can deduct it in a way that, for example, this means that you have a network of people who trust each other, people who will reach out for an opinion, people who value our collaboration, our contribution. So the result is the result because we have built these connections, and we have been in contact, and we have been trying to contribute, and, you know, so I think that is an intermediate step, so that we value networks, that we value the community around us, and that we will stay in touch, and that we will also send them grant calls or just like follow up without having a direct outcome every single time. So I would see that as a, you know, like if you think about, you have a concrete project output, but then you have a near-time outcome, and then you have long-term follow-up impacts that hopefully increases. So I see this as like stepstones towards something else. Maybe we need to think more about it.
It makes complete sense. Thank you. That's a great identification of increasing that long-term success. Great. Thanks.
Pleasure. Anyone else? There is still 19 people on the call, everyone.
I think we should let them go and have their evening.
I don't think we will be going on our own. This is too engaging.
I'm the master of the webinar, but thank you, everyone. Maybe as suggested previously, maybe we should send out a feedback form, but you also all know where to reach us and where to find us. So it would be great if we, if you had like follow-up thoughts or topics that you thought, oh, now I would love to do more on this, please drop us a line and we can think whether we can, what to do with that. So thanks for joining and see you hopefully soon somewhere and in real life.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye,
Take care.
everybody.